1. Okay, so this story is set 19 years ago. I remember the exact time frame because I was working at this place when the September 11 attacks happened. This place was the office of an interior designer in the big city I lived in. I had been looking for tech work, and an acquaintance had recently been hired on as office manager, so she brought me on. I was happy to land a job providing tech support and to be earning a decent hourly wage with flexible hours. But little did I know how bizarre this place was. How bizarre, you ask? Well, my acquaintance, the new office manager, was never in the office. The designer, let's call him Boss, was also rarely there. Let me tell you a little about Boss. He was an older guy, 60s easily, which was ancient to my 22-year-old self. He constantly ground his teeth and clenched his jaw. He always seemed distracted, and had a general vibe of just being weird. So I get this new gig and pretty immediately find myself alone in a nice big office space with no onboarding, no training, and nothing to do. Literally come to work, surf the web for hours, and go home or to class. Every now and then, Boss would randomly come in, ask me to do something vaguely tech-related, like create a spreadsheet for client names, and then he'd allow me to show him how to do the same thing. I'd do it, he'd be thrilled, and give me a bonus on the spot. Sweet, right? Right? Until Boss started coming in and losing his shit about random things. Like the green ink on his printed Excel spreadsheet was the wrong hue, or the office manager had called in and why the hell did she need the day off, or any number of random things. None of which were my fault, and many of which I had absolutely nothing to do with. Boss was ripping my ass a new one whenever he was in the office, which became more frequently. I learned from the office manager that Boss had been cleared to return to working more hours by his psychiatrist. Wait, what? Turns out Boss was never around when I started because he had a mental breakdown, and had to be advised to step back from work. So the distractedness, meds, the teeth grinding, uncontrollable stress reaction, he even did it in his sleep. It was so bad his dentist was concerned about his jaw having microfractured. Oh great. So this guy gets back into the swing of things and takes everything out on me. I'm 22, my wife's in grad school, I need this job. But I'm feeling the stress. I'm always thinking about work, stewing over the last thing I got unfairly yelled at about. I'm waking up 3 or 4 times a night for no reason I can think of. My wife says I toss and turn when I do sleep. This goes on for a week or 2. Then Boss walks in with a new handheld digital voice recorder, hands it to me, says, "When I record a voice note, I want it to be saved in here as boss, date, note, number. And I need you to show me how to use it." Okay, so this is actually in my wheelhouse, so I take the recorder, grab the manual, and start tinkering. I come up with a quick how-to curriculum, and then read a note in the manual. Voice recordings are saved in device as VR timestamp.vrn. Once you import them to your PC, you may rename them as required. So Boss's initial request is not possible with the hardware. But there's a simple workaround. I document that as part of my curriculum, and go sit with Boss to go over it. Naturally, he blows up that he can't rename the files on the device. He can't believe I can't figure this one thing out. Did I even look at the manual? He knows it can do what he wants. I just have to do my job and learn how to make the changes, and then... "GRS1, go home right now. And don't you come back until you figured out how to do what I want." Cue my relieved but gleeful malicious compliance. I go home. And since I know what Boss is asking is impossible, I never even consider returning. I don't call in the next day I'm scheduled, I don't go in. I try to forget the whole ordeal. I do begin to sleep like a baby. 2 weeks pass. I've moved on, looking for another job, doing school, normal stuff. I get a call from Boss out of the blue. "GRS1, you haven't been in a while. Is everything okay? When are you coming back to work? I've got some tech issues I need your help with." I'm floored. This guy is talking to me like the last time we spoke. He wasn't screaming at the top of his lungs, spewing spittle everywhere, so I say, "Dude, you told me to never come back until I figured out that voice recorder thing. So I didn't come back, 'cause that thing is never gonna do what you want." "Oh, that? I took it back to the store, so I'll see you tomorrow?" "Nope. I figured I was fired, so I've got another job. Please mail me my last check, but don't call me anymore. Thanks, bye." And I disconnected the call laughing. It never felt so satisfying to be unemployed. 2. This happened a year ago. I am still working at this company. My supervisors, team lead, manager, and department head are all fantastic bosses, and they will fight for their subordinates when right. Most of my immediate colleagues are great too, and we often help each other out. Some related points to this story. I have very severe sleep apnea. After a sleep study was done, I was told I stopped breathing 6 to 9 times an hour. As a result, I tend to need more sleep than most normal people. If the following day is not a work day, I will go to bed at 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. and wake up the next day at 3 p.m. I have 7 different alarms, all of which I never snooze, as I almost never hear them. Now, my bosses are aware and very understanding, and they do not mind me coming in late to work, as I ultimately still get things done. Also, sometimes my work requires me to be at work at odd hours, any 12 a.m. to 5 a.m. kinds of hours. We handle infrastructure. My usual work hours are 9:30 to 7 p.m., versus my colleagues' usually 8:30 to 6 p.m., as I had to work with clients and customers who have 9:30 to 7 p.m. work times. On to the story. Our CEO was cracking down on punctuality issues. There were some people who were abusing this, so I can't blame him. And HR was going hard on everyone. This lady who was handling disciplinary issues, we'll call her Karen, knows that I am typically late to work almost every day, so starts targeting me. My manager explains my situation to her and tells her that it was an exception granted to me. She remarks that it is entirely unacceptable and that no employee should be given special privileges, and called for a joint meeting between her, me, my team leader, and manager. After insinuations that I'm just lazy and lying about my situation with sleep apnea, or that I snooze my alarms and sleep late, she states that if I am late one more time, I will receive a warning letter, with the unspoken threat that I will lose my bonus for the year that was coming in 2 months, as it is considered disciplinary action. She then sarcastically adds, "If you can't get up in the morning, sleep in the office." I was pissed for a couple of seconds, but malicious compliance stories have taught me better. A plan began to form. Malicious compliance it is. Once work ends, I head home as usual, have dinner, relax and stuff. However, this time I head back to the office, reaching at 10:30 p.m. or so, with all of my alarms. As per office safety procedure, if there is an employee in the office, the lights need to be on, at least in the employee's immediate area. On the lights go. I set them up to start ringing from 6:30 a.m. as usual, and to ring every 5 minutes. I should also mention that my desk is right smack in the middle of the office, just outside HR's closed area. Also, any person with sleep apnea knows snoring is an immense issue. My snoring is so loud that it sounded like Thor was pissed. I went to sleep in my chair. Morning comes, people start coming in. It is 8:30 a.m. My 7 alarms ringing, my snoring bringing the thunder. Did I mention that I'm seated right outside HR and in the middle of the office? Karen, unable to take the noise, tries to get my colleagues to wake me up. They simply shrugged and said it wasn't part of their job scope or contract. My team lead and manager both refused to wake me up, as he starts work at 9:30 a.m. Karen tries to wake me up, but a choking and breathing incident happens, and it looked and sounded like I was on my deathbed. It scared her to tears. I ended up waking on my own at 10:30 a.m. Karen then complains to my department head, which I clarify that this was requested by Karen, to which both my team lead and manager corroborates. My department head deems that I didn't break any rules, and in fact, did do what she had said to, and thus had no grounds for disciplinary action. He then gives me 2 paid days off to rest, as I was in no condition to handle clients. I found out later that the rest of HR were never agreeable putting me on the late list in the first place, but did not and could not intervene, as they were not in charge of disciplinary issues. No one has really hounded me about punctuality again, outside of the occasional, "Hey, try to be on time next time." Just to assure everyone, I do try my best to. 3. There was a teacher in high school who really didn't like me. I never really knew why, but she was often cold and bitter to me specifically, which was noticeable. She was young and very pretty, even married a student after he graduated a few years after I left. So we were reading some general school read book in class. All had handwritten numbers in them to keep track of kids turning in books. Week after turn-in, she comes to me. Weeks after my house caught fire, was living in a hotel. Not burned down, but a room was badly damaged and smoke toxins made the house unlivable for months. Says I never turned in my book. Though I know I turned it in because I remember tracking through all the cold ashy house to my room to grab all my books. And I remembered hand-in day because I apologized it smelled a bit like burnt furniture. Melted cushion smell you never forget. I repeated said memory of this to her and she didn't seem to have it and doesn't remember that. Fine, I'll go through the books with you. Mine had a different cover than the majority as it was an older edition. Only a few others in my class had a similar cover, so it wouldn't be difficult, right?
Oh, well, I don't have time for that. You owe the school $15 or you won't graduate.
What? My family wasn't poor, but we were just dishing out tons of money for house repairs and replacement of everything deemed unsafe because smoke toxins. I didn't know what to say. She was accusing me of something I clearly handed in. And threatening my graduation over $15 when I knew the book, especially in the years of student wear condition, wasn't worth more than $1. It was $7 new. So I get my dad to bring me to a couple of local used bookstores and thrift stores in the city over. Lord behold the damn book, in similar condition, if not better, newer cover. Buy it for what you know, 50 cents. Very common school-read book. I turn it in the next day, because no way I'm giving this lady $15 for an old used book. More by principle at this point. She wouldn't accept it. Yelled at me for even attempting to get out of it easy or something. So I went to the kindest, gentlest lady you'd meet. She literally would give you the shirt off her back, and did to a teacher who says she loved her shirt. Next day comes in with a washed shirt she wore yesterday and gave her the shirt. She was our counselor's secretary, but better than any counseling the school had to offer in my opinion. I was crying over how mean the teacher was being and seemed unfair. I unload the whole story because she was easier to talk to than any official at the school. I had never seen a gentle lady like her get angry before. Little old lady got up and said, "Wait here." She grabbed her wallet and marched out. At this point I'm feeling guilty as I didn't want her to pay it for me, but she looked pissed. I only found out later from students in her class at the time that the secretary motioned her outside of the classroom, closed the door quite loud. Afterwards she said she took care of it, said that teacher actually had no authority to threaten my graduation without a higher authority in the system agreeing, and not to worry. She said how disappointed she was in her behavior, talked about her like a child. Over a weekend, my dad took us shopping for new clothes. All ours were deemed toxic by insurance, and insurance gave us $500 each to get new clothes. Being frugal, I had $250 left over as I got mostly thrift store or clothes on clearance. I bought her a nice shirt on sale I knew would fit, and a keychain that said #1 secretary. I got along with most teachers I had. Ones I didn't still weren't rude to me, were actually kind after the fire, except the one. I knew the principal's boss well too, was kind to many students and was close to my older brother. After he heard about it, apparently they instated a new rule after I graduated, that teachers couldn't take away graduation or any permission without written agreement among the principal or higher. Not just verbal as before. I still pop in from time to see the secretary and only her. After my youngest sibling graduated, I've seen her less. But if I'm in town, 2-hour drive to see my dad, Mom passed after a second house fire from injuries. She still remembered me 8 years later, still had the keychain, still super sweet, knew about my mom dying because of my younger siblings, and even said she wished there was a funeral because she wanted to be there for me. We opted out of a funeral because the family was not getting along, cremated her and gave her mom the ashes. As for the teacher, she still teaches there. 4. A little background. I'm a retired state park supervisor, and this happened a couple of years before I retired. The way the department is organized is that there are 3 divisions: parks, maintenance, and administration. The parks is responsible for the day-to-day operations of a park. Maintenance handles major construction and repair projects, the motor pool, equipment maintenance, etc., and administration handles the budgets, hiring, legal contracts, and so on. The parks in an area are in a group with a group manager, with a maintenance group with its own manager for support. The manager titles fell under administration, so someone with that title could be assigned to either parks or maintenance. So on to the story. Our longtime group manager retired, and we waited to see who the new manager would be. It was never a quick process, bureaucracy in action, but after several months a new guy was appointed as our group manager. He came in from another region, really excited about the promotion, but had never worked at a park, just in maintenance. About a month after he got there, it was time for the spring meeting of our group supervisors and assistant supervisors. This is where he announced that we were going to go by the book from now on. All overtime requests had to be approved by him first before any overtime was put in. Additionally, work schedule changes for us and our staffs had to be approved by him with at least 1 week's notice. Now, technically, he was correct. Those are the rules for state employees, and what he was used to. But we had always been more flexible out of practical necessity. One of the things about the park side was that during camping season, we were required to have a supervisor on site 24/7, so we lived in our parks. It wasn't too bad. We had a cabin which doubled as our headquarters, and it saved a lot on travel. The downside was that you had days where you were sleep-deprived, since some nights you'd woken up to take care of some problem. Once the camping season was over, we were generally working from home at our group headquarters, or helping out the maintenance group with repairs in the parks. Our previous managers had all done some time in the parks, so they knew what it was like. They told us to just take care of whatever issue happened, and then email any incident reports and overtime requests to them the next day. They considered staff scheduling to be our job. Our staffs were seasonal employees, college students, retirees, etc., and in order to accommodate various appointments, family issues, etc., we'd allow them to swap days with each other or to make up lost time. As long as staffers worked their 40 hours and the park was staffed, everyone was happy. But that was not going to be allowed any longer. His other policy change was that we were to call him immediately if we had to call in the police, the fire department, forest rangers, game wardens, an ambulance, or directed someone to a clinic for a medical issue. We all tried to talk him out of this, but he wasn't budging. A lot of shared looks, eye rolls, and shrugged shoulders resulted, as we all reached the same conclusion. After the meeting, my assistant asked me what I thought. I said, "He's really going to regret this. He has no idea what he's in for." Once the season started, he found out. Oh boy, did he find out. He got phone calls at all hours of the day and night, 7 days a week. Someone woke us up at 1 a.m. with a complaint that we had to go address. Phone call requesting overtime. "My kid's sick. Where's the nearest clinic?" Phone call. Called the police to deal with some drunk idiots. Phone call. Bear in the park. Had the game wardens in. Phone call. Every time we got asked to handle something outside of normal hours on his list, he got a phone call. He asked for it. He got it. With all the calls from every supervisor and assistant in our group, I don't think he got more than 1 or 2 nights of uninterrupted sleep a week. And I heard his wife wasn't happy about the constant calls to their house. To add to his workload, we made sure to send him emails documenting the reasons for each phone call. We sent in forms we'd been told years before weren't required. New guy hadn't requested them, but why should we leave it to chance? He was tied to his desk answering the phone and trying to read the flood of emails, forms, and reports he was getting. We were following his instructions to the letter, and then some. This went on for about 5 weeks, and then we got an email from him. He was resigning as our group manager and going back to his old job in maintenance. It had taken us just a little over a month to break him. I heard he was a lot happier back there, and I hope he learned the truth of the old saying, "Be careful what you wish for. You might just get it." 5. About 1.5 years ago, I worked at a bar-type place that was pretty small, but it got really busy at night, and besides the 2 owners, there was only me and one other worker who was considered the manager. Let's call him Kyle. I was paid $10 an hour, and Kyle was paid $15 an hour, which didn't really make much sense because for the most part I did all of the work. I served customers, ran the register, stocked and kept track of what we need, cleaned the entire building at the end of the night, and also cleaned the parking lot of the building since our customers would often litter all over the place. Kyle really just sat in the back and made whatever orders me or the mayors gave him. We were open from noon to 2 a.m. every day, important. Kyle and I worked from 6 or 7 p.m. to 2 or 3 a.m., depending on how busy we were. He would work the entire shift if the owners had something to do that day. Now, Kyle was an absolute terror to work with. He was always bossing me around and telling me something had to be done when I was already extremely busy. Always saying something wasn't done right, Or if I had a little extra free time, he would try to put some of his workload on me. Or if the owners let me have a good break, he would say I'm slacking off. Basically just constantly messing with me and making me mad. I considered myself to have great customer service, so I would never let it get to me while I was at work, and always tried my best not to get mad. Now, the owners often go on vacation a few times a year. This time, they were going on vacation together for a week, and Kyle was scheduled to work every shift from open to close. No problem for him since he's done it before. One of the owners also told us his brother would be coming in to watch over things, but he didn't really know how to run the place or make anything, so one of us were to always be there to make sure everything was good. Kyle and I both had no problems with the plan, and we spent that night getting everything prepared for when the owners would be gone. Next day comes, and I get a call at 11:30 a.m. from the owner's brother. He asks where Kyle is and says he isn't answering the phone. I call and get a hold of him, and he can't come in for some unknown reason. Okay, whatever, I'll cover your shift. I get ready, go into work, and cover his shift. I was still a little new to making everything, so it took me some time to get the hang of it, but after a few hours everything went smoothly. Especially since our day people were regulars and they all knew me. By the end of the night, I had worked 14 hours and was extremely exhausted, so I decided to just sleep in my car and drive home when I woke up. Well, of course, I wake up the next morning and Kyle calls me saying he can't come in again. I give the owner's brother a heads up and go home and get ready for work again. Day 3 rolls around and, of course, Kyle can't come in again. By this point, I was beyond pissed. I have my own life, and I have things that I actually want to do besides just work and sleep. I was pissed for a little bit until I realized what I can get out of this if I just work the entire week for him. I call Kyle back and ask why he can't work. He didn't give an answer, of course, and then I tell him that if he has something going on, I can cover the rest of the week for him, no problem, so we won't blow up his phone anymore, and he had no problem letting me. I told the owner's brother what the new plan was, and, while he was mad at Kyle, he said he would take my side on the whole thing when his brother came home. So for the rest of the week I came in every day at 11:30 a.m. and worked until 2:30 a.m. The owner's brother would come in and help out wherever he could and would run the register for me when we were extremely busy. The week ended up going great. Me and him never fell behind on work even when it got busy. The owner's brother also realized that having a manager was completely pointless, since I did almost all the work in the first place for $5 less. The manager comes back, and guess who finally shows up for work? Kyle. He comes in acting like he did what he was supposed to and that everything went as planned, and I went along with it during the shift and decided to keep my comments to myself for the end of the night, and once closing time came around, I let everything loose and the owner's brother was right there to back everything up for me. They were both so surprised because he had never done anything like that before. Now, I was only doing all of this because for that week I would have gotten a really hefty paycheck, because I ended up working over 90 hours. We were paid under the table. The owners were quite generous and ended up paying me for all the hours at the $15 rate, which I didn't expect but really enjoyed. Then they took it a step further because of the brother's comments. Kyle ended up getting his ass handed to him and was fired that night. And he didn't make a single penny for that entire week. Not too long after that, they hired a new guy at the same rate as me, and also stripped the manager position so nobody working there had any control over me, except for the owners, who now had a new respect for me and just let me do my own thing. I also proved to them that I am able to work a full shift and got as much hours as I wanted. 6. I'll be the first to say that this isn't some life-destroying, pride-obliterating bitch slap of an MC. But at the time, it felt like it to me, so I'm sharing. I work as a route driver in the beverage delivery industry, mainly targeting bars and convenience stores. Needless to say, after years of doing this, I've run into more examples of the Peter principle than I can count. It seems like everyone has one. That one manager who is either too trashy, too bitchy, or too incompetent to rise into the upper echelons of regional management. After 15 years of lording over their sad little gas station kingdom, they've become frustrated, nitpicky, bitter, and downright bitchy towards their staff and customers. 'Cause what else are they gonna do? Recently, one of our district competitors absorbed another smaller local distributor, and as a result, ended up biting off a little more than they could chew. Too many new deliveries, and too many new products made the skeleton crew they had run for years all but collapse. Seasoned drivers who I've known and worked alongside for years began dropping like flies. As a result, the company began hiring anything with a pulse and a commercial driver's license. Coolers started becoming messy as product wasn't condensed, was being put in the wrong spot, or just left on the floor entirely. Well, last Tuesday rolls around, and it is once again my time to endure the weekly 30 minutes of hell. I roll up to the gas station and truck in my 5 carts worth of product. As always, Karen's totally displeased with the order that the salesman placed and she okayed just yesterday, so I endure the requisite 5 minutes of bitching while she checks the order in. I'm wheeling the first cart away after the check-in when I hear Karen's shrill voice come cracking through the cooler door.
Clean up your shit. I have inventory tomorrow.
I've been doing this for years, and I take great pride in my work and customer service. I am super anal about organization and product rotation, and I've developed quite the reputation amongst my customers as the one guy that you don't have to babysit. Everyone but Karen agrees. I get in and get out, my drinks are condensed and organized by product and expiration date. I cut no corners. Well, on this day I had a small order, was running a bit ahead of schedule, so after putting all my product away, I spent another 20 minutes or so cleaning and organizing the other guy's mountain of product. By the time I was done, I had amassed a huge stack of broken down cardboard and shrink wrap from all the product he had haphazardly thrown on the shelf. I was somehow able to cram all this trash into one box that I myself had brought in and headed out. Of course, Karen is there waiting in the back room while she does her reviews for the upcoming inventory.
Geez, took you long enough.
Yeah, I took a bit of time cleaning and organizing your cooler, but it looks good in there.
Well, it better after all the time you spent in there. I've been waiting on you. I still have to do my cooler reviews.
I toss a box full of cardboard on the pile by the back door and start heading out.
Excuse me? Company policy says you have to take your own trash out.
No, I'm not a spiteful guy. Quite the opposite, actually. I'm usually quite chipper and polite. Something about her smugness and lack of appreciation finally just made me snap. I turn around, walk to the trash pile, grab the box full of cardboard, and without breaking eye contact, I turn it over and vigorously shake its contents all over the floor. Cardboard and shrink wrap went everywhere. I'd really packed that shit in there, and it took a bit of effort to get it all out. This is the only box I brought in, and you should know you scanned it in. The other shit is your trash I cleaned up in your cooler. Have a good day. The combined look of rage and smugness on her face as I walked by with a shit-eating grin was enough to make the rest of my day. I told my boss about it when I got back at the end of the day. He got a good chuckle out of it, since everyone else hates her as well. Of course she called and complained, but of course my boss only responded with, "Well, he did what you told him to, nothing I can do about it. Sorry." I love my company. 7. I'm going to have to be a little bit vague in some details to protect myself here, so I can't discuss the type of business, etc., so it's going to be a struggle. This is a lot of background to explain the kind of situation that developed over a decade. A place that was once truly fun to work at and easy to earn a bit of extra overtime became a dog-eat-dog struggle to survive. The low-level peons like me were split between those who felt disenfranchised and hated the management, those that were basically looking for an escape route, and that group of snakes who would sit and smile in your face and act sympathetic to your situation before sneaking away to inform your managers of anything they had learned which might have value. We were in a specific area of the business that was isolated and slowly being replaced by technology. So from over 1,000 in our building, it dropped to just around 250 when I left. Most of this was done through voluntary redundancy, but the managers were given incentive to fire as many as possible to save money on VR, and since manager jobs were also slowly being cut, they were desperate to fire as many as possible, but most were incapable of following procedure. Mike was that intelligent and brutal kind of manager who, like the others, had been promoted into the position, but knowing he wouldn't get trained officially, took it upon himself to become competent. The man had gotten dozens of people fired directly and more indirectly by helping less competent managers follow the correct procedure. A certain quantity of work at a certain level of quality was required, which everyone met. Yet they had a bottom and top 10 list And if you were on the bottom 10 list, your job was on the line regardless if you met the basic requirements. Since there were always a bottom 10 by definition, there were always 10 people on the firing line. This might be vague, but it has to be. Mike's team was a sort of clearinghouse for the bottom 10. We were shifted between shifts and teams for various reasons, but what I quickly learned is that somehow the shift's bottom 10 were all on Mike's team. My performance was consistently in the top 10, so I was safe on that count, but my attendance was low due to health issues, and my attitude was really bad. I also learned that the rest of the team was made up of people who weren't low in performance, but had low attendance and attitude problems just like me. And we had all been on the chopping block by managers who failed to follow procedure. In short, Mike was the executioner of the workforce. The most vulnerable to being fired were shifted around to his team, so he could succeed where the others had failed. Sooner or later my time came, and I had a series of absences while I had hospitalizations, and Mike pounced into action. In the space of a year he made 7 attempts to fire me, and each time I involved HR, who stepped in and protected me. I approached HR to make a case that what was happening was wrong, not just to me but to everyone. I made the case that the situation of Mike being the executioner created a hostile work environment, and the fact that I had gotten his attempts to fire me thrown out proved that he was not only hostile but was actively toxic. That it was against the law to discriminate on age, disability, and a myriad of other arguments. I was told that there was nothing they could do. Mike was untouchable, and had the full support of the upper management in our building because he was saving a lot of money in voluntary redundancy payouts by firing the vulnerable. Legally, there might be a case, but it would have to go to a court system, and not through HR unless I had an example of him being hostile and abusive. The person I spoke to was very sympathetic, and he suggested I look into some things related to job opportunities that were coming up. He mentioned that many of them were in managerial positions because a new type of roaming manager had been introduced. These were very needed and weren't getting much interest. Think substitute teacher, where a manager gets sent all around the country at the drop of a hat. It didn't occur to me instantly, but weeks later as I sat at work listening to Mike talk about his family, it clicked into place and my plan began to take form. Instead of making a complaint, I gave a glowing review and had several others do the same. If we couldn't get the man fired for his actions, we would get him promoted into a job that he couldn't take. The managers in our area were not even being considered for transfers because they lacked the training and qualifications to be managers anywhere else. Our reviews might just push him over the edge into getting a promotion, and since roaming managers were being sought, the two should dovetail nicely. We didn't give the reviews to our management, but directly higher up the food chain, way above anyone that ever dealt with our area of the business. Each of us mentioned that Mike had done an amazing job of sorting out problems, etc., had great management skills and an in-depth knowledge of procedure. Then we sat back and waited. A few months went by with nothing happening, and I thought the attempt had failed. But then we came into Mike losing his mind. He was shouting at the shift manager, his boss, about how he wasn't being given a choice. Turns out the higher management had gotten our reviews, looked into his record, and decided he was a perfect fit for the roaming manager position, and since they were in the process of getting rid of managers in our area, they insisted that Mike be pushed into it. Mike had of course tried to refuse the promotion, as was his right, but the higher management made it a choice of accept the promotion or be demoted back to peon. Mike had a family and couldn't just uproot them whenever the company needed him elsewhere, and a demotion with a pay cut back into the workforce of people who despised him and that were being slowly culled was just as bad. So he asked for voluntary redundancy instead and was accepted. His last day he went berserk, shouting and swearing about how badly the company had treated him after all he had done. I was unfortunately absent for it, but got a play-by-play and loved every second of it. Since I was told explicitly that I couldn't get him punished or fired, I got him a promotion he couldn't accept instead. 8. This happened about 4 or so years ago. I used to work as a cook at a dine-in restaurant of a truck stop. The lack of leadership by the restaurant management bred an atmosphere of being able to get away with just about anything among the employees, including how we interacted with the customers. My co-workers quickly learned I preferred to work than gossip. and even more quickly regretted the rare time or two they would try to get me involved in some drama. As most of them didn't like my sarcastic wit, they would let me be. I pretty much was back in the kitchen most of the time and didn't have to usually deal with our guests, but would be out front from time to time, usually on my way to or from the restroom, and did get to know many of our regulars. There were all kinds of truck drivers, the ones who were cool and fun to talk with, the flirts, the politically opinionated, every once in a while an occasional creep who had to be dealt with. All walks of life of drivers graced our establishment, and for the most part, no problems. Then there would be the drivers who, no matter what you did, were just outright jerks, rude to the staff, complaining about everything, and I mean everything. The weather, the repair shop, the music playing on the intercom, the showers, the price of diesel, the cost of items in the store, which was a separate department from the restaurant, the truck parking, all things that we had absolutely no control over, and hey, guys, we're just here to serve you food, okay? Yeah, it would get a little tedious listening to the whiners. So whenever I happened to spot the few habitual verbal offenders sitting out front, I would take the back way around to the ladies' room. Like I said, I don't care for gossip or drama. So I'm working the grill line. It's a somewhat slow afternoon, being middle of the week. The front counter is about half full with drivers sitting around chatting and eating, when one of our regular jerks comes in. Now this particular regular jerk was a special breed, the kind I refer to as not happy unless they're watching the world burn. This guy took being a jerk to the next level, never wanted to socialize with the other drivers, never tipped the servers. Always got his food to go. Yes, he would every single time open the container to inspect his order, grumble and make a snide comment. Would get the same thing every time, a club sandwich with fries. And for whatever reason, he would stick his head around the corner of the server line to see who was cooking before ordering, even though he would get the same thing every single time. Out of the corner of my eye, I see this driver peeking at me for a moment before he disappears from sight. Knowing what is coming, I go ahead and start the order. Now, the club sandwich we made was of the triple-decker variety. 3 slices of bread, ham, turkey, bacon, mayo, lettuce, tomato, and cheese, which, upon assembly, was held together with frill picks, very long toothpicks, with colored plastic frills on the end, and cut into quarters. Sure enough, the ticket pops up in my printer a couple minutes later. As I had gotten a head start, the sandwich is already laid out on my cutting board, and I'm waiting for the bacon and fries to finish cooking. I set up the to-go box and reach for the pan with the frill picks, only to discover that there are none. No surprise, honestly. The other cooks aren't exactly known for keeping up with the line stocking, so I go over to the storage room to get some. We are out. Completely. There isn't one single frill pick in the place. Oh, shit goes through my mind. Walking back to the line, I quickly brainstorm what to do. Realize that if I'm careful, I can cut the assembled sandwich and lay it in the box with the fries in such a way it will not fall apart. Pleased with myself and my idea, I finish putting the order together and place the closed container in the pass-through window for the server to back up. As I have no other orders at that moment, I decide to text my general manager, who is scheduled in later in the day, about the frill pick situation and to ask if he can stop and pick some up on his way in. Before I can hit send, I hear a bellow from down the server line. "What the hell is this?" Immediately on alert, I step around the server line to see Mr. World-Class Jerk glaring at me. He repeats his question, so I ask, "What's the problem?" "Why are there no frill picks in my sandwich?" He demands to know. My reply is matter of fact, because we're currently out. "Can't you frickin' order right? Why can't you do your damn job?" Crossing my arms, I quirk an eyebrow and flatly reply that it's my general manager who does the ordering, not me. That I wasn't even aware we were out of frill picks until just now. The server is standing nervously off to the side. She's waiting to see what goes down. Mr. World-Class Jerk inhales, sputters a little, then spits out, "Well, I can't eat this like it is without the frill picks to hold it together. Not while I'm driving." He thrusts the box into the server's hands. "I want each sandwich section wrapped so it doesn't fall apart." Then, muttering under his breath, he steps back out front as the server scurries towards me. She hands me the box. I turn, walk past the grill into the back kitchen, and to the prep table, setting the box down next to the dispenser. Open the lid. "You want your sandwich wrapped. You got it. each individual section, carefully, lovingly wrapped in a 4-foot-long sheet of 18-inch wide food service-grade saran wrap. Placing the sandwich back into its box, I walk back up to the server line and handed it to my coworker. She takes it out front. I see her hand it to this jerk, who proceeds to open the lid. He must have been satisfied because he closed the container and exited the restaurant. Walking back onto the grill line, I finish sending my text to my boss and wonder how long it will be before the fallout from my malicious compliance hits. It never did. I don't know if he ever called to complain to my boss. I certainly didn't hear about it. Though we never saw that driver come into the restaurant again. 9. After graduating college, I worked for about 6 months as a cashier at a local branch of a chain sandwich shop. Mostly, it was a great job. Customers were mostly polite, my coworkers were friendly and helpful, and I genuinely believed in the company's products. Even my bosses were pretty great, except for one. We'll call him the jerk. The jerk was belligerent, vindictive, nitpicky, and pretty much an awful boss in every way a boss can be awful. He had the type of shitty no excuses policy that defined excuse as literally anything besides, "Yes, sir, of course, sir." I could go on and on about all the different ways he was terrible, but this story is about one specific flavor of his awfulness. During our shifts, each employee had a certain section of the store they were assigned to keep clean in addition to their duties. The cashier's section was the front counters and displays, and the coffee kiosk. I don't know if it was officially the manager's job, but as long as I worked there, whoever was the shift manager always took care of the outside patio area, except for the jerk. At first, he would just say things to me like, "I'm really busy right now, could you clean the patio?" Which was fine. Part of the job description stated that if you had free time and the manager asked you to do something extra, you did it. He was well within his rights. But one day, he suddenly started asking me why I was shirking my duties by not keeping the patio clean. After all, the patio was part of my section. It wasn't, and never had been. I asked the other cashiers, and they all agreed they'd never been told anything about the patio being part of the cashier section. I didn't mind helping out with the patio if my other cashier duties were done, but it irked me that he'd taken something extra I was doing to be helpful, and turned it into something I was neglecting my duties if I didn't do. It felt like a bait and switch, and I felt cheated. The bigger problem, though, was that keeping the patio clean through my entire shift was a huge pain for me as a cashier. In the afternoons, I was often the only one at the counter, and customers would trickle in with a few minutes between each group. This meant that I was constantly having to run back and forth between the patio and the register, which confused customers and made it hard to get any actual work done on the patio. One day, when this was particularly bad, the jerk came up front and started asking me why I hadn't cleaned the patio. I started to explain that I kept having to come back inside to serve customers, but he cut me off. I don't remember his exact words, but it was something along the lines of, "That's no excuse. Cleaning the patio is your job. Now go outside and do your job. Don't come back inside until the patio is clean." That last sentence was music to my ears. I assured him that of course I would do exactly as he said, went outside and started cleaning. A few minutes later, a family walked past me through the front doors into the store. Through the large front window I watched them stand, confused, in front of the register. There was no one at it to serve them. The jerk had gone back into his office to attend to his oh-so-important manager duties. I continued to clean the patio. A few minutes later, another family came in and joined the first, standing confused and now annoyed in front of the counter. At this point, the jerk must have noticed them on the security camera, because he came out of his office and started ringing them up. Then came another set of customers and another. The jerk was at the register, so he had to serve them. He was now being forced to cover my job because I was too busy doing his. I finished cleaning the patio and came inside. The jerk immediately tore into me, asking where I had been, why I wasn't at the counter. Couldn't I see there were customers? I put on my most innocent smile. "But you told me not to come back inside until I'd finished cleaning the patio. I assumed that meant you would take care of serving customers, since I couldn't possibly be in two places at the same time." He just glared at me for the longest moment, then mumbled something about how I should have known what he meant, and I was never to pull a stunt like that again, and shuffled back to his office. Not much of a victory in the grand scheme of things, but seeing the momentary flash of panic in his eyes, as he realized his do-as-I-say, no-excuses policy had backfired, had me giddy for the rest of the day. 10. During the dot-com boom in the late 90s, I became somewhat well known for my expertise with a now somewhat obsolete networking technology. I ended up getting heavily recruited by a big telecom firm in Denver to run the technical side of a huge networking project they had underway. After multiple phone interviews, I was invited out for the big in-person sit-down, a 2-day affair where I met with the big dogs, other techies, HR, etc. It was a pretty killer opportunity. Took the trip. The first day of meetings went great. I felt it was a great match, etc. I did sense there was some tension between two groups over network architecture. Turned out that was one of the reasons they were bringing in someone more senior who could finalize the approach and get the project moving. That was fine, all part of the job, whatever. Got wined and dined after the first day and definitely feeling like the job was a match and that I'd be moving to Denver. Went in the second day, and after another round of interviews, the division head takes me to lunch. That's when it all blew up. While we were at lunch, the firm's senior management canned the entire project and fired every person associated with it. Apparently, there was a huge internal political war going on. This project was ground zero for the big battle, and this division just lost. We get back from lunch, and the manager escorts me to HR, where we're going to sit down and go over their offer. Instead, he's told what's going on and that he's out of a job along with everyone else on the project. At this point, I was told to leave. No apologies. It was just shitty luck for me. WTF. Okay then. I'm gone. I get back to the hotel, and there's a voicemail from me asking me to call the HR people. I'm pissed, but I call. They tell me they've had to cancel my return ticket and that I'd need to pay for the hotel myself now. But that if I would submit an expense report, they might be able to get me a check. There's a second voicemail from the front desk asking me to provide a credit card for the stay. And then I get a call on my cell phone from the car rental company, which I didn't answer. Turns out they also wanted my credit card. Fuck that. I called the airline and they said that my reservation had indeed been cancelled. But they also acknowledged that my reservation was paid for using a fully refundable ticket, which I was holding, and which back in the 90s was essentially as good as cash. Said they wouldn't know for certain if I could board until I showed up at the counter with the physical ticket. Great, just great. I'm on the hook for several thousand in airfare, nice hotel, and rental car after taking several days of vacation from my job for this interview. I don't think so. Here's a revenge. I packed my bags and loaded up the rental car, left the keys in the hotel room door, drove the rental car back to Dallas, stayed overnight in Amarillo, dropped the rental at the Hertz lot at DFW Airport, took their shuttle to the terminal I'd left my car at, and drove home. Over the next few months, I got several nasty phone calls from their HR and accounting departments, demanding I pay them back for the trip, including paying for the $700 drop-off fee for the car. Never answered them, of course, just let them go to voicemail. Eventually got a demand letter from their legal department, paid an attorney a nominal fee to send them a demand for compensation and threaten a lawsuit letter. Never heard from the firm again. The ticket itself was still valid. I ended up selling it to a friend at a big discount, and he was able to use it. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to the Revenge is Ice Cream Archives, episode 22, and thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories. Well, as I record this, Scotland is in the midst of a bit of a storm. I'm very fortunate that I'm living in, we'll call it the yellow zone. Basically, there's an alert going on right now. For me, in my area, it's a yellow alert, which means, not great, but certainly not awful. The people in the orange and red zones are the ones I'm concerned about. Looks like it could be quite bad. People are even having to evacuate their homes. So I hope everyone will be okay and come through it all right. As for myself, not really much going on. Got a COVID booster in a couple of weeks. Starting phototherapy for psoriasis treatment again. We'll see. Maybe it'll take this time. It won't. But that's it for me. I hope you guys are all having a great time, and if you're not, I hope brighter days are just around the corner. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.